All right. Hey, YouTube, I'm Lucky, and it's time for the Trials Meta Report. This is a long series I've been doing where I analyze the data from last weekend's trials. That was weekend 3 of the revamped trials, Wormhaven. We're going to go over all the data, all of the numbers. What are the strongest weapons in the game? After 3 full weeks of playing trials, we definitely have a good idea of what the best weapons are. Let me know down in the comment section below. What do you think the number one most used weapon throughout all the players in the entire world? What do you think is the number one most used weapon going to be from week 3 of Wormhaven? Let's go ahead and pull up the data here. First up, we're going to pull up week number 1, which was on Burnout, trials on Burnout. And we got week 2, which was on Distant Shore, and the data from last weekend, which is week 3, which is Wormhaven. So first up, let's focus on Wormhaven, right? The Vex Mythoclast, the number one most used weapon, 3.5 million kills. Does that make the Vex OP? I don't know. I did speculate that perhaps the Vex is a bit too hot, considering it was the number 1 weapon in week 1, as we can see here. It was the number 2 weapon in week 2. It's the number 1 weapon again in week 3. Does that make the Vex too hot, too powerful? I don't know. A lot of people said, well, look at all the hand cannons that are here, right? We've got Ace, number 4, Thorn, number 6, right? There's 2 140 RPM hand cannons in the top 10. Why aren't you saying those are OP, right? And in the other weeks, we also had a lot of hand cannons. For example, in week 1, we had Ace, Thorn, Palindrome. We had 3 140 RPM hand cannons. Why aren't we saying that the hand cannons are OP? Technically, if you were to add up all those kills, it would equal more than the Vex, right? Well, we'll see. Time will tell. It seems like the hand cannons are fizzling out quite a bit. Number 1 is Vex Mythoclast, 3.5 million kills. Number 2 is the Messenger. Such a strong pulse rifle, especially if you can keep your distance and get that Desperado procced. Number 3 is the main ingredient, which is obviously largely influenced by Xur giving us a really nasty god roll of this main ingredient. If you didn't grab that roll, well, hopefully you can grab it next time you find one of these things. We'll see if Xur brings anything else good. Make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and I'll bring you that Xur PSA like I always do on Friday. Literally 2 minutes after Xur arrives, I bring that video to you. Number 4 goes to the Ace of Spades. No surprises there. 140 RPM, very, very strong. I've talked about this weapon many, many times. I think it's the strongest hand cannon in the game. Number 5 goes to the Chaperone, right? The pellet shotguns have been nerfed quite a bit. People still want to shotgun ape. Mouse and keyboard players don't really enjoy the Chaperone quite as much. The benefits of it don't work exactly the same as it does on controller. It is extremely potent. Chaperone is very nasty. If you are a controller user, if you're on console, or if you use controller on PC, I'd highly recommend to use the Chaperone. That thing is a beast. Number 6 goes to the Thorn, another 140 RPM hand cannon. Not quite as good as the Ace in terms of popularity and in terms of overall damage output, but honestly, the Thorn has some really, really good perks to it. If you haven't used the Thorn, make sure to give this thing a try. I do think that there's a certain time and place when the Thorn will outplay the Ace of Spades, so definitely give the Thorn a try if you haven't used it in a while. The Fellwinter's Lie, the Shotgun Apes still hanging in there, but if you notice, it's dwindling down, right? Week 1, it was number 4, and now we're all the way down to the number 7 spot right here for the Fellwinter's Lie. Moving on to the number 8 spot, we have the Lawrence Driver, the new exotic linear fusion. A lot of people enjoying that, which is good to see. Number 9 goes to the Darkest Before. This thing is a laser gun. Might even be the only weapon on here that's like a full auto fire type weapon that could compete against the Vex Mythoclast. Obviously, hand cannons, if you peek shoot, jump in the air, stuff like that, you can definitely, outplay these Vex Mythoclast players. But Vex is just at such a nasty, lethal time to kill. If you're standing out in an open hallway and you don't have a Vex on, and you're fighting against someone who does, you're dead. Unless you have Darkest Before. Darkest Before can definitely compete. And then the number 10 spot goes to my least favorite exotic. I can't believe so many people are using this. Why? The Jotun literally makes it into the top 10 worldwide. 1.3 million people suffered the wrath of Jotun last weekend. Wow, I can't believe it. If you're out there using the Jotun, have fun. I just like to roast and tease about the Jotun. There's nothing wrong with it though, all right? Weapons that you won't see in the top 10 that are actually really good, like I've mentioned before, Lord of Wolves is really nasty. All these pellet shotguns got nerfed. Lord of Wolves is very potent. You see me using it quite a bit. If we go to last week, we can see we got Messenger, Vex, Ace, main ingredient. The Dead Man's Tail is up there because it was more of a ranged map. We don't see the Dead Man's Tail this week. Darkest Before, Fellwinter, Lord's Driver, Adored, and Eye of Soul are also in there. And this week, again, we don't see any snipers in the top 10 because it's not a ranged map. So if it's a bigger map, next week, definitely don't sleep on the Dead Man's Tail, or a sniper is always a good option. And going back to the first week, we have Vex, Messenger, Ace of Spades, Fellwinter, Darkest Before, Thorn, Chaperone, Palindrome Adept, Practice, and Rizwalker. Now, this is still when people are figuring out and finding what the new meta is and we can see that hand cannons are beginning to dwindle down. Week 1 on Burnout should be very comparable to Week 3 on Wormhaven, given the size of the maps, right? But they're not. We're seeing that hand cannons are dwindling more and more and more as the Vex Mythoclast rises up to the very, very top. And it's really surprising because the Vex is actually kind of hard to get. I know a lot of people out there still right now don't have the Vex because it's completely RNG. People are like, oh, I've done 40 clears of Vault of Glass and I still don't have it. Well, there is bad luck protection this season. So if you get out there and get to trying it on all 3 of your characters, if you have 3, you will slowly progress that bad luck protection, and eventually you'll get that Vex Mythoclast, and you'll be able to absolutely tear it up in Trials of Osiris and have some fun. This weekend had a really high population. The first week we had 750,000. The second week we had just over 700,000, and this week we are in the 600,000s week 3, which is extremely impressive, given that, you know, there's not really anything that extremely exciting to chase for in terms of weaponry and meta, right? I mean, if the Igneous Hammer, like it was this week, which is still a good weapon, and I've talked about this quite a bit, it's still a very good weapon. If the Igneous Hammer was like a 140 RPM, people would have been grinding this week like crazy. There probably would have been 1 million players this week if the Igneous Hammer was a 140 RPM, because it would be in the top 10. It would probably be the best hand cannon in the game. Might even be comparable to the Palindrome, right? But right now, all of the Lighthouse weapons, they're not, I mean, there's some that are really good. Like you do have the Messenger, of course, and the Messenger Adept, if that is next week, will well, not this week, but the week after this next week, because Trials is canceled this week, or Trials is on postponed this week because of Iron Banner. And so there's not a whole ton of exciting weapons to chase for, or at least the weapons that there are good, we've had for a while, right? So a lot of you already have a pretty good roll of the Messenger. You just got to get a roll that has Desperado. It's going to be a good roll, right? And so overall, if the loot gets better in Trials, I bet we would see over 1 million players week to week, which is definitely what Bungie is looking for. I know that Bungie is a business, and when they see how successful Trials is doing now and how this is growing the popularity of the game, number 3 on Steam regularly now, big growth, big numbers, overall community perception is good from the PvP and the PvE side. That's a big win for Bungie, and they're going to probably start investing and pouring more time into this Trials playlist, which they definitely should, because it's definitely worth their time. In my opinion, this is easily one of the best playlists. This should be their breadwinner playlist. This should be something, one of their main focal points. In my opinion, if I have to think about the history of Destiny, the things that they have absolutely done the best have been, in terms of activities, have been raids, and Trials have just always so memorable. I mean, there are a few strikes here and there, and there's a few other things that are memorable, to be honest, but those are the 2 big ones, right? And if they could invest their time into those will definitely pay dividends for Destiny 2, and we'll see continued growth. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the Trials meta report. What weapons were you using last weekend in Trials that aren't in the top 10 that you think could be in the top 10 this week? Obviously, like I said before, it usually takes us around 5 to 6 weeks to really solidify and know this is the exact meta. These are the top 10 weapons. And then what happens after about 5 or 6 weeks, if there's no sandbox changes, if Bungie doesn't do a mid-season change or anything, after about 5 or 6 weeks, every single week afterwards is like the same weapons if the map is around the same size. Week after week after week after week, there'll be 3 weeks in a row where it'll be the exact same weapons. This has happened many, many, many times before in the past with the Trials meta report, so just look forward to that, and we'll find out what the exact meta is. Obviously, things are pretty well set in stone at this point in time. I don't think the Vex is going to be taken down mid-season, so if you don't have a Vex, or if you're using that Vex, that's the way to go right now if you're trying to get that flawless. So that's a wrap on this video, though. Make sure to subscribe with notifications on, smash the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.